Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to the channel. This is a continuation of my Lightburn for Newbies series, and this is part 2 of the toolbar items in Lightburn. My last video, I'll link it up here if you haven't watched that. Go ahead and watch that first. It'll make more sense if you watch them in order. And let's just get right into Lightburn and continue on with all the different toolbars that are available. Now we're going to get into text tool. I told you we would because I didn't want to get into that just yet. Here's how you create text in Lightburn. Click on that. Click where you want the text to go. Oops. And if you type properly, you'll get what you need. Then you can click off it, and it is now selected. So with it selected, up top here you have your font chooser, and it previews as you select on one. It previews what the font's going to look like, and your height, that's the overall size of the font. Okay, we have that. Now horizontal spacing, as I raise that up, the letters get farther apart. I think that's also known as kerning. And vertical spacing, we need 2 lines of text for that. So let's bring the text tool back up. Enter. There we go. Double escape to get out of there. So my vertical spacing, that's either going to spread the lines apart or bring them closer together. So that's those 2 functions. Our alignment, left, middle, right, it moves according to where the box was when you started typing. And there again, top, bottom, middle. Now this is over here where it says normal. We're not going to get into that right now. That's for a different video, but that's for when you're dealing with variable text. That tells you what type of variable it's going to use, and the offset also goes with the variable text. So that's for another video. But now back into here, we can do bold. If the font has a bold function, it'll bold it. We can do uppercase. That works with, I think, all fonts that have, well, if they have capital letters. So it changes no matter how you typed it. It makes the entire text box in uppercase. Italics, it just skews everything. And distort, we'll get into that in a minute. And then welded. If you look at it here, if I uncheck welded, now all our tails are still there, and they will actually get cut. If we cut this font like this, the tails will get cut out, and you'd have little pieces, holes falling out, and they would not be joined together. But if you click welded, Lightburn by default will weld it as they go, and even if you change the spacing, it keeps them welded as long as they're touching. Like, see right here between the M and the P, as I reduce that one more time, now it's going to touch and it's welded in, and that's back to the default 0. So that's the welded feature. Now, if you look on your text here, you have this blue dot. That allows you to curve the text. And the more you pull it down, the more it curves that way, or you can curve it the other way by going up. So, let's see, now that welded all this together. Now if I click on distort, watch how it changes. See how the letters changed? It actually squeezes them or stretches them as you go around. Like, look at the M down here, and let me change distort off. See how it changed, and they're not. So that's a feature that you will have to work with and decide what works best for your particular project. And then if you double click on the blue dot, it runs it back to straight text again. So it ends that mode. So there's your text features. Now this button here, the little map pin, if your laser's connected, if you click, and wherever you click it on the screen, it will actually move the laser to that point. Oh, and another thing for zooming, we didn't discuss that. Zooming, if you take your mouse wheel, you can roll in and out, and it will zoom centered on your mouse cursor. So let me get rid of this text. Let me bring out another. Yeah, I'll do polygon, might be better for this. Odd shapes, there we go. So now this is your measure tool. Click on that. If I hover over that line, it gives you the length of that segment. It tells you about the entire object. It's got 6 nodes, 6 lines, the length of the perimeter, the overall width, the overall height. This line's 58.5, that one's 82.04, 82.04. And it also gives you some coordinate information and as well as the angle, which can be very handy if you're trying to align certain things. And let's see, let me put another object out here. If you grab the measure tool, you can actually take and measure distance between. Well, I'm on this point, but you can tell how it's a crosshair. The cursor is a crosshair. Now it's just an arrow. When it's a crosshair, it's measuring from that point. And I'm just holding the mouse wheel and dragging, or the mouse button and dragging over. And you see how it changes the crosshair there. I'm 51 millimeters between these two items. Or if I go over here and hold down Shift, that makes it stays a straight line, 219 millimeters. So that's how you can measure distances between items. Okay. Now, let's get rid of that. We'll make a select. The next item down is the offset tool. That's another tool that gets used all the time. So let's start with 0 here. So right now, I did a 0 offset, and you don't see anything happening here. Let's bump it up 1 millimeter. It's going outward. So if you look, this marching ants selection is the original. If I choose inward, now the marching ants are on the outside. If I choose both, we're going to get 2 outlines, inward and outward. So because we have sharp points, and we're going out, corner looks best. Bevel kind of notches it, and rounds it over. There again, you'll have to decide what is best for your particular project. And then if we had multiple items, sometimes like a font, you might want to choose outer shapes only. Sometimes you don't want outer shapes only. In this case, it doesn't make a difference. So I'm going to leave it a corner, 3 millimeter. Select resulting objects. So when we're done with here, this line will be selected. Delete original objects. If you choose that, this one will be deleted when you're finished. It all depends on what you're wanting to do. Those are options that you'll have to check for every time. And optimize, simplify results, I always leave that on. That just makes the drawing a little bit better. So we'll click OK. And now you see that outer piece is selected. The inner piece is not. We can move that around and undo. Put that back where it was. So that is how the offset tool works. Now I'm going to show you another function of that. Let's go into fill mode. See how my shape is filled in. If I click on the offset now, it just changed it. Now we have an outline area that is filled in. Even if I drop it down to 0, it's still, because we duplicated it, the way Lightburn works is when it sees a line, it changes fill states. Because there's 2 lines here, it brings it on and off at the same time, and it makes the fill go away. Now if we go to both, we're working off this line, so we're going outward, so it starts to fill, sees that line, goes inward, but it sees the other line, then fills the center in again. So that's just something with how the fill modes work. Cancel that. Alright, let's get this back to line mode. Okay. Next we have our Boolean tools. And let me grab these, and grab that. Okay. So if we select all of these and hit group, or weld actually, it gets rid of all the intersections and just leaves the outer lines. This button works with multiple shapes. These are all grayed out. They will only work with individual shapes. So if I select just these 2, now these are able to be used. So Boolean Union does the same thing, gets rid of the center and just keeps the perimeter. subtract, got rid of part of it. That only kept the intersection. And if I bring up the Boolean Tools, which I highly suggest you use the Boolean Tools until you know exactly what you're doing, because selection order does matter again. So I bring it up, the Boolean Assistant. If you click on it or hover, it shows you what each selection will do. Or you can reset it. So if you hover across it, it shows you how each will change depending, and then you choose the one you want and click OK. If I grab these two and do the same thing, bring it up. Union tears out the center. Intersection only leaves the center. Subtract A minus B. Subtract B minus A. Just complete opposite results is what you get. That's just this, and that there's an entire lesson there on the Boolean Tools later. Now let's get rid of that. Moving on down, we have our grid array and circular array. If you want to use the grid array, click on grid and choose your number of columns, however many columns you want to go across. This shows your total width of the entire array. This is your spacing, and your choices are center to center or between. And you notice how that number changed as I changed the selection here. So let's say we want to have 5 millimeters between. Well, get over here. 5 millimeters between them. And then we start doing the rows, and those are 10 millimeters between. And actually the default behavior is it starts at bottom and goes up, but I typically, in my design, in my mind, I usually have reverse direction on because I usually start at the top left and work down. So that's just an option that you can make. Now if we, in reverse direction, is going to move everything over to the left. I normally start in this position and work across that way to the right and down. So that's why I have this reverse direction on, this one not. Now shift by half. Watch when I click that. It shifts 1/2 of the distance. So now the center of these circles are in the center between the line. And then same thing here on the right. On the y-axis, it just shifts the other one. When you shift both, it gives you a really mix up. So don't do that. Random orientation. There again, if you had something in here other than a circle, that would show up. Auto increment variable text, that's if you're using the variable text feature. We'll get to that's very specific. With a regular array, you have individual objects that you can edit individually later. With a virtual array, you have one master object you can edit, and it makes all the changes in all of them. So let's take a look here. Let's put some text in here. Let's just center it up. Okay, so now I'll select that and go into my array tool. All right, so we have our array. Let's look at the mirrors. Okay, every other column. See how it changes? It rotates an X. It flips them back and forth this way, either on columns or rows, and this way here it flips them the other direction, vertically. So if we do create virtual array, click OK. Now if I change this from an A to a number 4, they all change, or 41. It changes every individual item. If I undo, go back to my array, and just create a regular array, not a virtual array. Now, oh, they're grouped. Ungroup. Now each one is individually editable. So that's the difference between a virtual array and a regular array. In a regular array, each item is individually editable. I can move them, do whatever I want with them. Where with the virtual array, bring back up. Virtual array, you have a master item, and if I change it, and if you add something in after the fact, it doesn't work. But if it's there to begin with, when you create the array, it's part of the array. Whatever changes you make show up. You got the letter E, for example. You want to change the size of the circles. It changes all of them. Then you can recenter them. So that's the difference between those two. Now let's move on to our circular array. So select the item, then shift select what you want the center of the circle to be. Go to circular array. But now as we increase the number of copies, with our start at 0 and our end at 360, 2 copies are exactly across from each other. Rotate copies. There they stay the same direction, so let's go. Now we got 4 copies, they're 90 degrees apart. Variable text, we'll deal with that in variable text features. Group results, select results. That's just what happened. And same with the regular array. When you close out, whether they're grouped together and whether or not the objects are all selected when you're done. Use last selected object position as center. You really have to have that to even get any kind of output with it. So now let's see what happens if you selected in the other orientation. Select that first, then the number, and do the same thing. And these are circles, so that doesn't even matter, but you can just go crazy and get all kinds of neat patterns. Delete that. Let's see here. And it doesn't have to be a circle. It can be really any shape you want, but depending on how you select them, selection order, we get that pattern. Let me drop. Or if we select it this way, we get that pattern. Now we're going to look at the set start position. Let's put a rectangle up here to work with. And we select that. It shows it starts here and goes around the right. Let's just verify that. Bring up the preview window. And it doesn't start at that position, but it does go in a clockwise direction. So let's shift click to change direction. Now we'll bring it up again. And it starts at that point and goes counterclockwise. I wonder if I shift click it again, if it'll come over there and start from that point. Okay. So now we're going back the other direction and see if it still starts there, if it starts back where it was originally. Nope, now it's starting from that point. Interesting. I don't really know much about the usage for that, where it makes a difference, but maybe in some advanced, it's certainly not a beginner's issue to worry about. And finally we have the radius tool. We make a rectangle, click on the radius tool. Let me get out of draw mode. Now click on the radius tool, and it's set to 10 millimeters. So if I come over here, it hovers, you see how the cursor changes. It changed that corner, change that corner. I can do all 4 corners, or I can make this corner 15. And that one 15. So you can do different radiuses on the different corners if you want to by choosing them individually. And also if you click on it again, it removes the radius. And then bring it back in. Now it's going to go make these back to 15, where they were 10 before. Let's say I'll make this 25. Come over here. So now that one's 25 and this one's 15. But if I click it, it goes away. And when I bring it back, it goes back to 25. You get the idea there. Now, the other ways we can create the radius corners is I showed you. Holding down controller command, you got the blue dot that you can change it. Or if you go to shape properties, you can change the radius that way as well. Make it 25. Or I wonder, I haven't tried this before. Let's see if we go negative 25. Oh, it does work that way. Good. So it's the same thing. You can get the scallop edges by just inputting a negative number there, and you get all 4 corners. What you can't do though is you can't change them from the shape properties now, because this is no longer a primitive rectangle. It's been changed and has nodes added to it. It's just one of those things that I can't really explain to you, but it's been changed. It's no longer a standard Lightburn rectangle. It is now a shape. And I know a rectangle is a shape, but it's a vector shape. This here is a built-in shape, and they behave differently. And one thing we didn't discuss out here, I'm sorry, is the node editor. So if we click on node editor, click on here, you see we've got these nodes, and you can adjust them, you can move the handles, you can move the positioning of them, you can delete them by hitting the D key. There's a lot of things, and I have a video on the node editor that goes into detail on all that. So just know you can get there, but this shape here, what I was talking about being a built-in, a native Lightburn shape, this is not a vector, so there are no nodes there to edit. Here we have nodes, here we don't have nodes. It's still an oddball shape. It's no longer a straight rectangle, but it's had just some, it's a built-in Lightburn shape, what they call a primitive. And you can't node edit a primitive. And finally, we're on to the last section of tools, which is the docking tools. And they reside up here in the corner. So let's start. Say you want to have one item docked to another item. So let's click this one here and click dock. And here we have to the left, to the right, to the top, or to the bottom. And you can see the big line is where it's going. The small line is the object that's moving. So I click this to the left, it goes over, and it goes right through this box and hits the wall. The behavior of this is it will not dock to the inside of an object, only to the outside of an object. So if I go to the right, it's going to go all the way to the other side. But now if I come back to the left, it's going to stop when it hits the large rectangle. It's exactly what it did. So this one here, same way. If we go up, it goes to the top wall. If we go down, it hits the rectangle and stops. Now we have a couple of options here. One, let's look at padding first. Let's bump that way up to 10. Go back to the top, and you see it doesn't go quite to the top. It stops about 10 millimeters down. And if we go back down, it pads itself 10 millimeters off of this rectangle. That's what the padding function does. And I've had that mess me up before, where it's like, why is it doing this? Not realizing that I had a dimension set in padding. So I leave that to 0 by default for me always. Now let's say we want to move both these items. We select them both. And if I move them both to the right, they both go and both hit the wall. If I move them both to the left, this one hits the rectangle, this one goes and hits the wall. I'm going to undo a couple steps. I'm going to move as group on and watch the difference in the behavior. When I move to the right, the closest one hits the wall, but the other one stays relative to it. It acts as though it's been physically grouped, but it's not physically grouped. They're still individual items. You can still move them around then once you deselect them. And same here, if I leave move as group, they go over and they hit the wall. This one hits the rectangle, and that one stays relative to it. So that's move as group. Let's uncheck that. Now we have this group down here, which is not grouped. There's all individual items. I just have them all selected. Not move as group. If I move them right now, they go over and everything hits the wall except for these two hit each other. And if I go the other direction, that one didn't even grab. Oh, that one is just outside this rectangle, so it got stuck by the rectangle, and these got, the rest of them went over and everything went to the outside wall. So let's back up again here. Now if I go lock in our objects and do the same thing, the rectangle hits the wall, the center objects stay where they were. It's not grouped, but it's acting like that. And if I go the same way to the right, same thing happens. If I disconnect lock inner objects and say move as group, they act the same way. So either one of those will work for that option, but there are times in your design work where where you want things to jump together, and that's a quick way to do it. So there you have it. We've gone through all the toolbars in Lightburn and shown you what each tool does. I know these were a couple long videos, that's why I had to break them up into two, but you know, there's a lot of features here, and I don't have a quick way to explain them in depth enough to you. So that's why the videos took as long as they did. But if you found value here, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned, there's still more coming in this Lightburn for Newbies series. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.